It all starts with the fact that you need to win just one time. This is what flashes through the back of the hero's consciousness at the moment of battle with the monster. But suddenly, he jumps high up, as if taking off, with a terrible grin on his face. And this guy clearly did not expect to see. The thought of a single victory still continues to spin in his head, while the monster tries to strike directly at the hero's head. However, the guy failed to dodge, and he flew to the side several meters like a rag doll. The monster's blow turned out to be so strong that the hero was literally slammed into the wall, leaving a huge dent in the rock. This blow didn't have much effect on the guy, and he, with an evil grin on his face, managed at the last moment to thrust his sword right into the heart of the approaching monster. The same one froze in place in surprise, and only after some time did he realize what had actually been done to him. The monster howled in terrible pain, but it was too late, because the hero, taking his weapon more conveniently, cut the disgusting creature into two parts in an instant. At this time, the hero begged the hellish world in which there was no one left for him to have a chance, while the system notified him of a level increase for destroying the white dog. The window also reflected that the guy received points for experience, but he was only worried about the only opportunity to end his torment in a world where there was no one else except him and the constantly appearing monster. At some point, the system reported that the necessary experience had been completed, and it was followed by an increase in level, which the hero could not help but rejoice at, which was reflected in his desperate face. But suddenly, the system began to glitch and display an unknown error. Instantly all the guy's joy sank into oblivion, and for a moment he fell silent, lowering his head to the ground. When the system was restored, the windows showed that the level of the sword warrior, Rowan Ben, had dropped from 4th to 1st. This news finally finished off the hero, and he, bending his whole body, frantically began to beg for an end to his suffering. The system only made things worse, notifying that Rue's transition to a new area would only be available if his level was equal to the 5th. The last straw, and the guy's hysterical cry began to echo around the area so much that even the birds flew into the sky from him. Ryu recalled fighting a monster during his first year in this world. Then the memories smoothly flowed into the next year, and he still continued to fight, fighting for life with all his might. The 3rd year came, and at some point, the system notified the guy that the probability of his survival in the last battle was even less than 5%. However, he continued to fight and desperately pierce the body of the next monster, pushing his soul beyond the limit. And even the distracting question from the system about the desire to commit suicide by falling into the abyss does not distract Ryu from the task assigned to him to kill the monster. Several more years pass, or to be more precise, 7, and the inscriptions on the wall marking every day grew to the very ceiling, the height of which is several meters. In the 8th year, the hero was already so desperate that he stopped even marking the days of his stay here. Out of anger and resentment, he took and broke the wall with marks into pieces with his bare hands. Ryu lived in this kind of isolation for many years, and worst of all, he couldn't do anything about it. However, despite all this, it was simply impossible not to notice that the hero had become much stronger than before. Therefore, at some point, the guide began to think about what his actual level was after such a long time. Although, even despite such interesting topics for himself, Ryu was not particularly distracted by them, because he was fighting another terrible monster of this world. At the same time, other interesting events were taking place in an unknown city. In some gateway, a middle-aged man was lying on the ground, and above him, with her legs at the ready, sat a strange girl whom the man called a monster from another world. The very second he said this, the girl looked up at the sky and shouted forgiveness from the goddess for her future action. She began to frantically pierce the chest of the unknown person and rejoice, because she had not killed anyone for a very long time. While her friend, who was guarding the alley, asked her to stop, because if someone from the city saw them, there would be a lot of problems. Her partner also reminded her that it is never too late to kill a resident of LNA, even though all the work has already been done. The girl agreed with this statement, saying that now they just need to find a person like them. They need an earthling who also ended up in this dimension. After that, the girl and the man set fire to the alley in which the corpse lay. It burst into flames in a split second, and they simply quietly left the crime scene. As the main character found out after a while, the place he ended up in is called an imitation of Zell-La, and he himself was chosen as a suitable player. The main purpose of Ryu's stay here was that he needed to survive in this world and increase his level. At first, when the hero first appeared here, he was attacked by an unknown dog with bright red eyes, which immediately grabbed his hand. The guy absolutely did not understand how he got into such an incomprehensible situation, and the beast continued to press on. Ultimately, after a couple of unsuccessful attempts, R managed to throw the dog off him a short distance. The guy was simply horrified by what was happening, because he did not understand what kind of animal was now in front of him, as well as where he was. However, while Ryu was frantically thinking, assessing the current situation, the dog rose from the ground, dusted himself off, and rushed into battle again. The hero simply did not have time to either assess the situation or deny the current reality, so he simply, on reflexes, grabbed the first stone he came across and hit the animal in the jaw with it. Looking at the entire class that is happening right in front of his face, Ryu gradually begins to regain consciousness, assuming that he simply died. However, the most important thing that the guy understood for himself was that if he couldn't kill, it means you're no longer a tenant. At this time, the dog resumed its attacks, and even a completely broken jaw, from which blood flowed in a stream, did not stop it on the way to its goal. The guy tried to drive the animal away by shouting, asking him not to approach, because he didn't understand why the dog was rushing at him. Suddenly, a window appeared right next to Ryu's face, which turned out to be some kind of instruction. It specified the level of the dog and its characteristics, such as fighting strength, approximately equal to the abilities of an adult unarmed man. The window also contained information that the hero could gain experience in various battles with powerful monsters and thereby try to increase his level, to which Ryu reacted without the slightest grain of joy. He couldn't figure out what had happened to him, but he thought he was stuck in some kind of virtual reality video game, and it all suggested an unknown glitch. Even before all the events and getting into an unknown world, R got up every day at 500 when his whole body ached. He wasn't lazy, he just returned from the army 3 months ago, so he decided to let himself relax a little. In the army, it seemed to the guy that all he had to do was return back, and he could do anything. But during his entire stay at home, it dawned on him that he liked absolutely nothing. After 2 years in the army, the hero assumed that he would not change at all, but the harsh reality clearly decided everything differently, and now he is simply idle. And then one day when Ryu, as usual, was sitting and looking at posts on the internet, out of nowhere, an unknown entity began to envelop and absorb him. The hero understood absolutely nothing, and he didn't really have time, because he was very scared of what was happening, and after a few seconds, there was no one else left in the room, and only the gaming chair was spinning a little in different directions. So the guy found himself in an unknown place, in which a strange voice announced that all the suitable players had been collected. While the only thing that worried Ryu was the question of whether he died or not, the unknown voice was surprised at the very small number of players, because he heard that the candidate's income exceeded 7 billion. And the guy standing next to other people complained that he could not see anything, and it was not clear who was speaking. While the voices dealt with questions about the number of participants, Ryu simply stared into space but realized that someone had been instructed to move the instructions. However, here, one of the voices asked whether everything that was happening was too artificial, to which they answered that it was good for motivation and adaptation, and this was confirmed by existing other players. After this, the landing of instructions began, and a powerful charge of light suddenly flew into the hero's chest. However, the system noticed an error that specifically concerned Ryu. It turned out that the error was related to the management, to which the voice only calmly replied that one person was not yet a problem, so everything was fine, and they could continue, after which player number 398 was moved to the location. After a while, the hero found himself in a situation where he had to defend himself from an unknown animal in order to survive and pierce its skull with a stone. At some point, the system notified the guy that he had destroyed a certain mops and received 13 experience points. In the hero's own head, there was only a refusal to accept the fact that everything that was happening was really reality and everything that happened was actually happening. However, all these thoughts did not give him peace, because he understood perfectly well that, in this case, his entire past life, along with his beloved parents, would remain there, and he did not want to accept this. The guy only returned from the army 3 months ago, and this has already happened to him. Ryu was especially upset by the fact that he hadn't even had a girlfriend before, and he didn't understand why they chose him, because there are so many people like him in the world hiding from the army. Suddenly, a window that appeared showed information that the probability of survival of the hero in Lana with his abilities was less than 5%. Such a message did not make the situation any easier, and the guy himself, grinning hysterically, asked the void whether the creators of this place had at least a remnant of conscience. But suddenly, in a new window, there was a completely unexpected question whether the hero wanted to commit suicide or not. Ryu himself only thought that an ordinary person was suddenly kidnapped, and he ended up in another world, and what was strangest was that they told him to kill monsters and raise his level, and now they also ask whether he wants to die or not. And it is not clear whether the guy will return home if he chooses this answer or actually die. Then Ryu decided to try to calm down, telling himself that there would be no point in kidnapping if, through suicide, it was possible to return to the original world. After this, the guy decided that no matter what death he died, it would be the end for him in any case. Therefore, first of all, he decided to think about how to survive and get out of this strange place. After which, the system reported that he had successfully passed the test for the strength of fighting spirit and thirst for life, and therefore, the player's combat skills increased. In front of the guy's face, a board appeared with options for different classes from which he had to choose one. Ryu agreed with the system that he was unlikely to be able to fight with his bare hands. The first to be highlighted was the fighter class, whose resource was aura, and the various combat techniques used were ideal for po-combat. The hero immediately remembered the recent incident and rightly reasoned that although this is quite interesting in games, it is somehow not very desirable in an unknown world. The next option was a mage with a saphir, long-range attack, the use of mana, and the ability to deal 6 types of damage. So the guy decided to choose this class. However, the system denied him this request because his skills are not enough for magicians, which the guy was very unhappy with but no less surprised. He decided to try to change his choice to a warrior mage, but even here he faced defeat in the form of a refusal due to a lack of skills. The same thing happened with the healer class, so the only option left was a fighter, and Ryu himself only noted that everything that happened did not look much like his own choice. After this, the hero was allowed to choose his weapon from several presented options. The guy decided that the best solution would be to choose the longer one and decided to take a long spear, not intending to in any way yield to the system in this choice. However, everything is not so simple, and instead of a spear, a long sword fell at the hero's feet. And to all of Ryu's objections, the system simply produced an error, so it was not possible to change anything. After this, the hero frantically recalled the phrase of the unknown person about the error, namely with loading the instructions, which was simply worse than ever. The guy was very dissatisfied with what was happening because he was not even given proper instructions, and the constant error in the system did not bode well. A moment later, after realizing everything that was happening, the hero simply laughed hysterically because he absolutely did not want to do what some unknown people had planned. But raising his sword, he decided that such a weapon was still many times better than an ordinary Raymond from the road. However, despite everything that had happened, Ryu had absolutely no desire to die, and that was how his endless hell of leveling up began. And the very first thing the guy decided to master was the ability to wield a sword normally. Although after several attempts and a triumphant fall, hope began to slowly leave him. So, 7 painfully long days passed from the moment of hitting Saratha. The guy asked the program countless times how he could get back, but it still didn't give an answer. The hero wondered if it was because of a mistake, but one way or another, in order to survive, he had to fight. So Ryu continues to fight against animals that are very similar to dogs, but in the end, as it turned out, his opponents were and remain the dogs of hell. But something has changed, namely the level of these monsters. The guy noticed that at the second level, the dogs now wait and attack between swings of the sword, and also note to himself that he is slowly starting to get used to the current conditions. In such cases, knowing the habits of a hellhound, it is not difficult to find a way to overcome them. However, the hero still does not know how to use the sword correctly. This greatly upsets him. Although the guy has little choice, you have to do what you can if you don't want to die. However, he also gained abilities, namely at the second level, it was a cut, received for killing a hellhound. When a hero's level increases, they gain a skill, and they gradually increase as they defeat monsters. And even without sword skill, using the cutting ability turned out to be quite simple, and this is one of the few values of the instructions, especially if you use the built and search engine. Also, after a while, it turned out that hellhound meat contains the necessary amino acids, and its blood contains minerals, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, so it can be safely eaten, although the meat is a little tough. The hero also noticed for himself, upon close examination, that the teeth and claws of dogs cannot cause serious wounds since they are dulled, which only makes the place seem more artificial. It became obvious to Ryu that everything in this world was planned for a specific purpose, and if the goal was not lifelong imprisonment, then there was no point in kidnapping. The guy also remembered the words of the unknown person that the initial number of candidates exceeded 7 billion, so he became convinced that there were other players. And at that moment, a window appeared before the hero's eyes in which there was information that upon reaching the 5th level, he would be able to leave the Stone Mountains location and join a group with other players. This unexpected notification greatly excited the guy. As it turns out, the Stone Mountains are a kind of initial safe zone in which players reach level 5 train and fight fairly weak monsters that are unique to this region. Therefore, the system advised, in the future, to try to overcome difficult situations with the help of other players, and after reaching the 20th level, he can move to the Rada continent. The guy, having listened to all this huge amount of information, tried to transfer everything he heard to the game format so that it would be easier to understand all this chaos. However, he was also worried about the future when he would be transferred to the continent because it was absolutely unclear what exactly he would do there, to which the system failed again. And even despite the breakdown, Ryu found out the most important information for himself, namely that the level of hellhounds will increase in accordance with his. When the system asked the next question about returning home, it again failed, and then the guy concluded for himself that he could no longer trust the instructions and all this, only if he wants to meet other people and get new information. Then Ryu decided for himself that he must reach the 5th level and get out of the shackles of this terrible place. It was from this moment that the hero began to search for and kill the dogs of hell with new persistence. And since the level of the dogs increased in accordance with the guy level, it was not particularly difficult for him to defeat them. And so the days passed, monsters were killed, new experience points and new levels were obtained. After a while fighting with the hellish dogs that continued to grow stronger, the hero received a new ability, namely a horizontal blow. Upon reaching the 3rd level, it turned out that the monsters on it have combat skills comparable to the skills of an ordinary novice fighter. And so long, painful days passed in this hell because all Ryu did was eat, sleep, fight and kill, and so on, day after day. During one of these battles, the hellish dog hit the guy in the chest with his muzzle so hard that he even flew to the side a decent distance. However, the hero quickly found his bearings and did not even fall to the ground, managing to get up just at the moment of the next attack from the monster. And then Ryu made a rather interesting maneuver. He picked up sand from the ground and threw it right into the dog's eyes, which quite successfully temporarily blinded it. And this second hesitation on the part of the monster was enough for him to deliver the final crushing blow. The system reported that for this, he received 81 experience points, which were also necessary, and the guy was very happy that he was able to do this. Already on the 27th day of his stay in this world, it was written in the window that a new level had been gained. And now, after all the events, the hero had 3 abilities, namely cutting, horizontal, and vertical blow. Also, the guy could not help but noticed that increasing his skills had a certain effect on his body because, at first, he even had difficulty lifting a 2-handed sword, but now he can swing it with ease. In this world, efforts are always rewarded. However, the system window again showed an incomprehensible error, and the guy was absolutely unprepared for this. Although he had assumed something like this in the depths of his soul, it turned out that due to this mistake, Ryu's level dropped from 4th to 1st in an instant, which greatly shocked the hero. And then he decided to convince himself that this was probably all an error in the graphical interface, and now he would go to the status window, and everything would be fine there. When the window with the characteristics opened, it confirmed everything that was said in the error, and the guy's level actually decreased. Although all other characteristics and abilities remained the same, the hero was incredibly upset by this because he tried so hard and hoped for the best. However, he still decided to try to calm down and begin to think sensibly, not only about the inability to increase the level but about future tests. Ryu thought that since he was in the safe zone, the hellhounds would also be level 1 like himself, and then it would not be difficult for the hero to kill them and increase his points. However, all his reasoning turned out to be a complete fallacy, and the hellhound of the first level was not at all similar to the previous ones. The monsters became stronger and stronger regardless of the guy's level. Now any mistake really began to cost the hero his life, and so time passed. R killed hell dogs in the hope that his level was about to increase, but each time he was defeated because the level always returned to the very bottom. This cycle of identical events, the increasing danger each time, gradually began to drive the hero crazy so much that he began to literally howl in despair. But the system still did not give in. No matter how many times the monsters were killed, a constant error was displayed in the level characteristics window. Every time the hellhounds didn't make the task much easier either, becoming stronger and stronger each time. Ryu continued to kill increasing monsters, and checking experience points literally became his routine. He endlessly increased the level from the first to the fourth, and during these unbearably long, 7 hell-like years, he was able to understand one very interesting thing. Players do not age, and in addition, thanks to the recovery skill, all light wounds on the body heal in about a day. Another important detail is that after rolling back to the first level, skill points do not disappear anywhere. And yet, due to the fact that the level does not increase, new abilities cannot be obtained. The hero only has horizontal and vertical strike. But the hellhounds also increased in strength according to his experience points. And one day, a new monster appeared in the form of a huge bone dog, terrifying in appearance, after which the guy realized that since this particular monster appeared, it meant today was his lucky day. Ryu remembered that the place where he was created specifically so that players could raise the level faster, but it seemed to the guy himself that it was created in order to kill them as quickly as possible, because it is impossible to survive here. On the other hand, he himself has already managed to adapt. At the same time, the unknown person who just moved all the players to this world finished the job of transmitting all the necessary instructions, and finally decided to move on to the 5th simulation of the world of Kra. Another unknown person, in response to such a statement, asked the first one if he had really gotten used to it, to which he replied that due to the fact that the simulation lasts a long time, that it needs to be cleaned. This time he decided that the simulation would be designed for a larger number of participants. However, stepping aside, the unknown man's gaze was drawn to one forgotten simulation. He took it in his hands and kept trying to remember why he had forgotten about it, or whether it was all due to a glitch, or whether he simply didn't like it. It was impossible to say for sure, but looking at what was written on the card, information was revealed that the participant in the simulation was in the process of moving to Saratha. One day Rai wakes up and sees his home room before his eyes, so the first thing that comes to his mind is that he must have returned home. The hero wonders how much time has passed since the move but decides to put it off until later, deciding to sleep just a little longer. However, he is unable to fall asleep because the growing, nasty, unknown sound does not allow this, which makes the guy wonder why it is so loud. But all he sees when he opens his eyes is a window asking if he wants to commit suicide. The system notification instantly brings the hero to his senses, and he sharply withdraws his hand, looking in fear at the glowing display. As a result, Rai simply wakes up on the ground in some unknown cave again, noting to himself that on this day, he again managed to save his life. For him 10 full years of insane killings of hellhounds had passed, and the situation in which he found himself was due to the fact that he fell into a cliff but, by a lucky chance, he did not die. The guy no longer understood whether it was good or bad that he was alive because he again had the hated first level. From such total hopelessness, he simply cannot stand it, and clutching his hair, howls into the void like a wounded animal. Ryu does not understand whether he can live in this world and in all seriousness begins to think about putting an end to all this horror once and for all. However, at the same moment, he swept these thoughts far away from himself. He thought about it many times that maybe, with the help of suicide, he could return to his home, and in the end, he agreed that if he died, that would not be bad either. But since death would come to him in any case, it was not the time for him to die yet. That is why the best solution for him to rid himself of negative thoughts was to kill another hellhound. A total of 10 years have passed since Ryu appeared in this world, or rather in the 10th year, he stopped keeping track of time, he didn't count further, so he didn't know whether 5 years had passed or 7 years had passed. However, in between killing hellhounds, the guy even managed to find a hobby, and this was already at least some variety in his life. And even though survival in this place is not an easy task in itself, This cruel environment does not forgive any laziness at all. Now this reality has become only his reality and nothing can be done about it. There is no point in objecting in any case. So every day passes quite intensely, and the hero sincerely does everything he can. It is also important to note that since there is no one in these mountains, then R decided to build his own country here, and he started from home. So every day was full of worries. As a result, after some time, all the guy's anger passed, and reality began to be perceived more simply. And because of this, when one day R was again attacked by another monster, he wasn't even particularly surprised. This hellish dog was quite large and had wings, but as it turned out, it was not too surprising for the guy. That is why, when he attacked the hero, he calmly stood and watched exactly until the moment when the monster broke Ryu's house with its huge paws. The guy was very angry at what happened because he built this house with his bare hands, and even if it was not big now, this time, the hero invited the monster to build a new one from his bones. The guy noted to himself that recently, monsters smaller than the size simply don't appear, but their meat is completely tasteless, and they are also quite noisy. Guys themselves, and even despite such a bulky size, these hellish dogs move at quite a high speed. During all the time of hunting in these places, Ryu learned all the tricks of these animals, and now he knew that at the beginning of the battle, the monster would definitely try to attack him in close combat. And at that very second, the dog used his ability, namely the Devil's Breath. The guy was a little surprised at such an outburst on the part of the monster because he did not expect that he would use this skill so early. After his enchanting attack, the hellhound landed on the ground and watched the place where the charred hero should have stood. However, complete disappointment, mixed with considerable surprise, awaited him. As it turned out, this dog's attack has a huge area of action and it is impossible to deviate from it, but if you concentrate well, then it is quite possible to withstand it. After such a show, Rai was not only not surprised but even a little angry because the monster, with its ability, set his hair on fire, and this is not very good because there are no hairdressers here. When the enemy is desperate, he begins to use all sorts of magic, be it lightning, fire, light, or something else. This kind of magic is quite fast and painful, so you can use the earth to protect yourself. And after all the machinations carried out, you can finish off the enemy and call it a day. However, this is not always possible the first time because the guy still lacks sword skills. That is why, sometimes, you can simply use your physical strength instead of weapons. Due to a glitch, the guy's level does not increase, and his abilities are not added, but if you repeat hundreds, tens and thousands of times, you can also learn something. After a while, Ro began to get a kind of triple cross strike, and although this is not a real ability, and it doesn't really look like a cross, it is still an indicator of considerable work. And now, having defeated the next monster, you can congratulate yourself on another day you have survived. The Nameless One continued to look at Ryu's card, recognizing him as the very person who made the mistake. No one understood why the guy was still in this world, and only then did it dawn on him that the guy was in the process of moving Saratha, which in turn was already third, while he himself finished work on the fifth simulation. Which means that 22 years have passed for the guy. And only then did the unknown person realize what a mistake he had made, and that there was definitely no excuse for him because there was no way to even kill this man. Having looked at Rai's level, the unknown person wondered how he even managed to survive with such indicators because his skills and abilities are simply rubbish. And then he decided that he urgently needed to deal with this, and there was one very interesting way to do this. The guy himself at that time was sitting on the tail of the monster he had killed and reasoning that he was again only able to reach the fourth level, so he decided to look into his status, in which his abilities remained at the same level as when he almost reached the fifth level for the first time. When he wanted to look into his additional status, the indicators there were much better. The guy sat and discussed how much stronger he had become, although it didn't matter because the level still did not rise above the fourth. The hero just wanted to calmly eat normal, tasty food and meet at least someone. He clearly did not understand how much longer he had to live like this and why he needed all this. As a result, he decided to think as positively as possible with the hope that he would be able to get out of this damned place. And at that same second, a bright flash of light occurred in the sky, which Ri looked at with complete incomprehension. The unknown person decided that if he put pressure on the guy's simulation of the world, something might come out of it. However, in this way, he will be able to destroy all records on this person, and with the fourth level on the Wrath of Continent, he still won't last long. The world around the hero began to slowly collapse, creating a kind of funnel, while the unknown person himself wished R a speedy death. He fell into the unknown, absolutely not believing that this was actually happening, after which the system notified that the player was moving right now. After some time, in an unknown forest surrounded by mountains, there was a colossal surge of energy, forming lightning, which struck right in the center of the forest. At that same second, the dragon sitting in a cave nearby began to stir, hearing strange sounds from outside. He shouted angrily that those who came from another world did not disappoint him. At the same time, R looked around in disbelief and did not understand from what moment he began to take everything for granted. Maybe because in front of him there was always a bright red sky in which there was no sun, and there were only yellow bushes around, so then why did he move right now? As a result, the first thing the guy did in the new location was jump as high as possible above the treetops. He had no words to describe everything that was happening, and at that moment, tears of happiness welled up in his eyes. After all, now he is not in that hellish place that was full of endless stone rocks, but in the forest of Sath, the kingdom of Gret. Also, this place was the northern part of the entire Ra continent, which the hero ended up on. The guy was happy about the changes that had come because, despite the fact that he was used to the rocks, they could not become a full-fledged home for him. However, he still did not understand why he suddenly received the 5th level so suddenly and also earned a new skill, which is oral translation. And then a thought struck Ryu. He remembered very well that access to the Ra continent opens only from the 20th level. Then it was even more strange and unexpected why the hero ended up here, to which the system produced another error, and the hero could not get answers to his questions, having a bad word for the developer of the entire system. At that very second, an incomprehensible new tab opened in front of the guy's face. This turned out to be a mission for him, which involved the need to destroy one of the 6 Wrath of Goddesses. Ryu was very surprised by this situation, but the most important thing in all this was that the reward for passing the test was a return to Earth. The system also gave advice on being in the new world. They recommended hiding information from local residents that you are from another world, and also joining the Hunter Guild of the military city of Ampros. But before the hero had had time to really understand all the intricacies of the events taking place, a blue dragon appeared above his head with a deafening roar. Taking a closer look, the guy noted to himself that he had never encountered monsters like this before. At some point, it finally dawned on him that the creature that appeared before him looked a lot like a dragon, to which the monster began to get angry because how dare some vicious demon from another world so calmly enter his forest domain. He thought that the hero decided to attack him with his bare hands because Ryu did not see any weapons. The guy reacted to these words of the dragon with lightning speed, but did not understand why such an inconvenient incident had happened just now. But he reasoned that the sword had to be found as quickly as possible. The monster, in response to this reaction, decided to start attacking immediately, which Rai was fundamentally against this situation because he was not going to give up so easily. The angry dragon launched a stream of blue flame towards the hero with the clear intention of getting rid of him as soon as possible, but the guy managed to jump out of the way in time. The hero decided that he needed to act quickly, so he wished the monster a speedy death. Jumping up and swinging well, Ryu sent the greening dragon into the sky with one blow and hurried to quickly find his sword nearby. However, to the utter shock of the guy himself, he did not need to look for a weapon. The battle was already over. As it turned out, in the knightly order of the kingdom of Exer, there once lived a real natural dragon whose name was Ether, and he was the pride of all knights. However, trials overtook everyone's beloved Ether, because the stupid king constantly demanded to be ridden on a knight's dragon. But it is always important to remember that flying is not a joke, and the stupid king, not realizing this, one day paid for ignorance with his life. The knight who took care of the dragon was soon executed, but before that, he managed to help Ether escape from the kingdom. The dragon hid in the forest and began to live there, but he had no time to be sad because aliens from another world kept appearing in this forest. They could not become worthy opponents to the natural dragon, but Ether, a kind soul, could not kill them all, and perhaps this was the root of all his troubles. The aliens themselves were only thinking about how to kill the poor dragon, therefore Ether thought that aliens from another world should not be left alive. So since then, they have appeared again and again. As it turned out, the monster was not exactly a dragon, it was a wyvern that simply had nothing else to do. How, however, either considered himself a dragon, only a small one, because he had wings instead of front paws, and this is precisely what is characteristic of Wyvern. Therefore, the natural dragon asked to spare him, because he was telling the pure truth, to which the hero replied that it was important to him how the monster could find out that he came from another world. To this, either replied that he actually didn't know, it's just that when aliens die, their bodies evaporate. Besides, the locals don't often go to this forest. Watching all this, Ri noted to himself that what was happening was more like a performance, although in appearance, there was no evil intent on the part of the monster. And then he asked if it was true that this was the forest of Sath, the kingdom of Gret, to which either corrected that the kingdom Gret was destroyed, and now Ezer is here. The guy realized that the information and the instructions had not been updated for a long time, and then it became unclear how he could return. While the dragon tearfully begged to spare him, the hero decided to ask why then he attacked him since he was so peaceful. And Ether replied that it was all because that vicious demon was from another world, which Ryu was very angry about. Viva, in fear, began to apologize for his words and accidentally mentioned the goddess, and from that moment, the guy asked to tell him in more detail. Ether tried to get away with the fact that the place where he was hit was very painful and needed to be anointed as soon as possible, and because of this, Ryu continued to get angry with renewed vigor because once he started to say something, he had better finish it. Then the dragon said that the first aliens came to his world 40 years ago, but at one time, everyone got along well with them. But this did not last long. In order to increase their level, the aliens began to kill the Ras, and at some point, the strongest of the aliens gathered into a group. They created an organization called the Great Land, whose goal was to kill the goddesses. These aliens were strong because they could kill enemies with the strength of a dragon since, with each kill, they increased their level of strength. Not a single magic in this world could stop their group under the leadership of a 100-level leader, and all this continued until the world-famous 4 heroes of the continent came, who were subsequently killed one after another in a short period of time. These warriors were the Lord of the Sword Bethel, the Archman Jobia, the Assassin Kin, and the Lord of Life and Death Holin. After their death, responsibility for the entire continent fell on the shoulders of 6 goddesses. So, Earthlings are considered accomplices of evil demons from another world, and now, all aliens must be subjected to the death penalty. After this story, Ryu became quite angry because he was kidnapped. He spent several decades among the vast expanses of bare stones, and also that the entire continent would consider him an enemy. Ither, in fear, began to justify himself that he had absolutely nothing to do with it, because this happened before his birth, to which the hero asked the question that the goddesses were really so afraid of aliens. He realized that it seemed that no matter what you tried to do, be it trying to negotiate or just living a quiet life, you would be branded as a demon in any case and beaten to death as soon as they recognize you as an alien. After that, Ryu frantically raised his sword in the direction of the frightened dragon and said with confidence that he would definitely be able to survive and return to his home. However, he also noted that no one in this case should know who he is. Either watched the hero's behavior in fear and wondered if this man was really a demon like the others, after which he shouted that Ryu didn't really know anything, and one smart wyvern could help him with this. 5 days later, the guy learned that if you leave the Satch Forest, you can see the majestic fortress walls rising above the horizon. This is the city of Ampros, located in the northern part of the kingdom of Exer, which is known for its large size and huge population. The nearby forests and vast plains of the Een Valley were full of a wide variety of dungeons and strange monsters. Many hunters have risked their lives to get rich quickly in the Unpro Hunter Guild. Those who cross the threshold of this building are either hunters or those who want to become one, or aliens from another world. And then one day, Rai decided to go to this guild. And when he entered, all eyes were immediately directed in his direction because he had an outstanding physique, and the locals had never seen him here before. They assumed that he was from another guild because he looked like a veteran of his craft. The girl who stood at the registration desk warmly greeted the new guest and noted that she had not seen him here before, suggesting that he was new to the Onpro Hunters Guild. After which, looking at the rather gloomy expression on the hero's face, she asked how she could help him. To this, R answered with a little hesitation that he only wanted to become a hunter. Before all these events, the hero paid attention to the words of the dragon that he could help the hero in the current circumstances. Ether responded to this that it was quite difficult to identify an alien in the guy, but even without this, the world was full of dangers, although the thought that the hero could kill him at any moment did not leave him. To this statement, R noted that the wyvern was also wanted and had also killed quite a few people, so there was definitely no need to follow the guy's every move. Besides, it was nice for the hero to just talk like that because he hadn't talked to anyone for many years. Seeing such a reaction from the guy, Ether was very moved and remembered how he had once had a similar attitude from the knights who cared about him. And then the dragon decided that he would help the guy, but only on one condition, that he would not ask stupid questions. To which the guy, of course, agreed to such conditions, saying that doing this would be a piece of cake for him. The dragon responded to such a statement by noting that in their world, they most likely don't say that, and the first thing you should take care of is the hero's clothing. Ryu immediately began to undress right in front of Ather, to which he screamed in surprise because he did not understand what this man was doing right now. The guy noted to this that the dragon was also naked, so there was no problem, and began to try on different clothes thrown at him by the wyvern. A few minutes later, Ether began to talk about the everyday life of this world, especially emphasizing that you can't take off your clothes wherever you want, to which the hero interrupted him and asked him to tell him in more detail about how to meet the goddesses. Ether said that in Ra, only a few were granted an audience, because first you need to receive S blessing, like the 4 great heroes who stopped the alien invasion. He did not exaggerate that now, when Theus demon is still strong, the only way to obtain the blessing is to join the ranks of the hunters, and only by killing all the monsters created by the demons. After this, the hero remembered that his instructions said something similar, namely that you first need to become a hunter. However, Ether did not understand what instructions he was talking about, and then it dawned on Rhea that only he could see it, but he explained this to the dragon as the existence of some kind of leadership that only aliens like him could see. True, in his case, some kind of buggy is constantly happening, but the wyvern didn't know this word either, so she still didn't understand what was going on. Then Ether decided to continue his story and talk about the work of hunters, whose clear advantage was relative freedom of movement, and in addition, being a hunter, a person with a high level looks less suspicious. However, you need to be extremely careful because many aliens also thought so, and then they were revealed. Therefore, under no circumstances should the hero behave like a stranger, which means that if he is nervous, he will definitely give himself away. When the guy was already in the guild, and he was registered under the name of Eric Heron, born in Gambo, which is located in the northern part of the kingdom, the hero tried with all his might to stop worrying. He was constantly tormented by the thought that he might somehow give himself away, and everyone around him would guess who he was. Then the girl warned Worley welcomed the guy to the Onpro Hunter Guild, and Ryu rejoiced, because everything seemed to work out for him. Ether told him in detail about where he came from in order to merge with the others as much as possible, and the hero exhaled because he thought that the most important step had been completed successfully. The girl said that now they can send a request to his previous guild, and she will independently transfer the data from his pedigree as well as his birth certificate, because he definitely gave the documents there, with which the guy categorically disagreed. She, of course, did not understand why but assumed that he only wanted to become a hunter, and then all the people present in the guild became wary, taking the handles of their weapons. Then the girl, in some fear, asked whether he was a member of any guild or not and glanced briefly at the people nearby. The men around realized that the guy was clearly not a hunter, and because of this, they began to think that he was an alien, but they did not show it because this could end badly. The hero was very alarmed by the surrounding atmosphere, because he did not understand where he had screwed up. Rai looked around frantically and did not believe that he would still have to engage in battle, but he stopped himself because, in this case, if he attacked first, he would definitely give himself away. The girl asked him to lend a hand in order to test his skills and level in accordance with the standards of the guild. To do this, it was enough to simply put your hand on the verification stone. Then the hero realized that they wanted to test him to see if he was an alien or not, and if he was discovered here, then there was no point in hoping for a meeting with the goddess. He thought that he could just run away before it was too late, but in this case, it would automatically mean recognition. The hero knew that he could quite calmly deal with everyone present, but he decided that he would still put his hand in and then let it be what will happen. Before he came to the guild, the hero dreamed that everyone would be very surprised at how many skill points he had. Also, the others would have noticed that he would be at hero level, meaning that he could very well kill the Os demon. However, these were all dreams. And while the guy was telling it all, the dragon watched this with bewilderment and even some irritation in his eyes. The guy continued to sing praises to the inhabitants of this world and say how cool they are, to which Ether asked him to be silent and listen carefully, because he began to feel embarrassed. When the hero leaned his hand against the sorting stone, information was displayed on it that the hero was only a 5th level fighter. From what they saw, everyone standing around even held their breath for a second. However, this did not last long, and a moment later, the entire guild burst into loud laughter because they all seriously thought that the guy was an alien. Rai absolutely did not understand what was going on around him, which is why the girl, still laughing, began to ask him for forgiveness for her behavior and what happened. When she calmed down, she explained everything by saying that aliens usually name all sorts of remote villages as their place of birth, and if he had a higher level, they would definitely not have avoided the misunderstanding. Other people in the guild noted that aliens were usually level 20, suggesting that they had some kind of certain standards, which was why anyone who tried to join the guild at level 20 was cut off. To all this, Rai was only glad that his level had not risen. While the girl at the counter explained to him that the entry fee was 300x, the guy knew that this amount was approximately equal to 3 million won in his world, and he took what he had now from Ether for a while and promised to return it within 6 months if everything went well. He handed over the money to Ryu in a completely broken state, and those around him assumed that he was giving away everything he had, remembering that aliens always have a lot of money. After that, he was given a sign with the guild emblem and warned that if he lost it, he would have to pay a penalty of 80x, and as the level increased, the amount of the penalty for the loss also increased. The guy was very happy about this coincidence of circumstances because now he can finally begin his rise from the bottom and become famous as a hunter. Then the hero decided to act immediately and asked whether they had tasks in the dungeon or not. But then he was interrupted by a man who suddenly appeared who only laughed at Ryu's idea, saying that he would simply feed the monsters and advised him to abandon this idea because he only had the 5th level. The girl at the counter asked a certain Mr. Rao if he was going to visit the Sach forest with a group, to which he replied that recently there had been a lot of monsters in the dungeons, and they had begun to cause inconvenience to the local residents. Therefore, they simply cannot entrust such a task to a newcomer, because they need someone with approximately the same level as him, and R's level was the same as Ether's and was 27. Rai noticed that compared to the rest of the guild members, the man's level was indeed higher, but those around him only spat because of his arrogance. And then he decided that it was best not to get involved with this person, but the girl with whom Raud was talking remembered that he had one free place in the group. Then she suggested that R with his 5th level could join, because not only dungeons but even an individual task would not be able to cope, therefore it would be good for him to start with minor work in R's group and gain experience, which the hero himself was not very happy about because he absolutely did not want to go to this show-off. However, to this request, R said that they already had a new member of the group, which meant that there were no empty seats left. The girl who had previously been standing behind the man introduced herself as AAS and said that she was a magician of the 25th level, to which the hero noticed that her level was much higher because, in reality, it was as much as 37th. He realized that she had some reason for hiding her level from others, and when she looked in Rai's direction, he quickly looked away because he was glad that there were no empty seats left in Rao's group. The man, with unprecedented SID, began to describe that their guild is famous for its members, and since such a nice lady asks him, he simply cannot refuse and decide to take responsibility for an insect with the 5th level. The hero became very angry at this statement and thought that it was better for this man not to be his opponent, because if he continues like this, he will die a painful death. While Ro mockingly reached for the guy's sword, reproaching him for he carries such a big toy with him. However, when he tried to get the weapon from behind R's back, he realized that he couldn't even move it. Amazed at how he simply carried it behind his back, having become completely angry, the hero looked angrily towards the man who, from such a look, had lost all his former passion. Then he took the hilt of the sword and calmly lifted it with Ro hanging on it, saying that this is how he usually carries it behind his back. Everyone around immediately began to rejoice because they always wanted someone to shut up the arrogant man. While on the second floor, a group of people watched with interest what was happening. One of the group was happy because he had finally found what he needed. The guy stood like that for some time, holding the body of his unwanted interlocutor and looking straight into his eyes with irresistible rage. R looked at him in bewilderment and fear, and cold sweat continued to flow down his pale face. The rest of the people who observed the scene looked and could not believe their own eyes. However, the man who had previously been sitting on the second floor and simply watching became more and more happy about what was happening. He was very surprised by Ryu's physical form and assumed that his level was definitely no less than 10. Immediately R raised his voice and shouted at the man who, as it turned out, was named Bork, and asked not to interfere with the newcomer when he was being taught by more experienced ones. The hero, at that moment, wondered who the person standing in front of him was, while he, in turn, said that in the guild, of course, you can fight if the guy wants to. However, he did not want him to destroy everything around him, in which case, he would have to fight not only R, but also all the members of the Ampro Guild. Rai immediately cried out that he did not want to harm at all because he had no idea of fighting with everyone here because, in no case, could the hero stumble. Having been thrown off the handle, Ro began to shout that such a pathetic person like him, who has the 5th level, could do absolutely nothing without him. And unfortunately, the guy could not disagree with him because indeed, he was right, and all the money had already been spent on joining the guild, which means that with his current level, he is absolutely no good for anything. However, Bor categorically disagreed with this because he believed that with such a pile of muscles as the main character, he could easily raise his level. As it turned out, the man was just looking for a person with a similar form and decided to offer Rai entry into his guild. While the hero himself slowly digested everything that was happening, Bion also suggested that the guy clearly did not achieve this form in one day, but judging by his level, he still did not have enough experience. The hero noticed that the man himself has a 25th level, which is considered quite high, and since he himself is an alien, his leveling speed will be much higher than that of the Rathians. Thus, he is unlikely to last in the group for too long, but if he is banging his head against the wall, then he should at least put on a helmet, which means he should definitely agree to such an offer. As it turned out, the city of Ampros itself developed thanks to monsters and dungeons, and most of the jobs there were related to hunting monsters or with materials that are obtained from their flesh. In its vicinity, there are 2 famous places in terms of hunting, namely the South Forest and the dungeon located in the Een Valley. There were several small villages near the forest, but the monsters usually did not cause much harm to them and rarely attacked its inhabitants. However, recently, in the vicinity of one of the villages, a large number of monsters have begun to be noticed, and in order to find out the reason for what is happening, and at the same time hunt them, many hunters come here from all over the country. And then, on one of these days, the village was attacked by Dolka monsters who live in the Sach forests and have the lowest rank and are also slow, although their muscle mass is capable of crushing stone. One of these monsters rushed towards Jorn in an attempt to knock him down. However, the man was much stronger and was able to repel this attack with the help of his shield, with which he blocked the monster's path. Then he pierced the monster's head with his sword, and he fell dead body to the ground. Jorn Rall himself was a fighter of the 25th level and the first shield of Ampros. A huge number of different creatures died at the hands of this man, and even now, he, although with a slight hitch, was able to finish off another monster. At one point in the battle, Beeger was joined by a tall, dark-skinned girl with a spear at the ready, piercing one enemy after another. She laughed at the man that it was time for him to retire since an ordinary Voke could push him away, but it was Embo Veneta herself, who was a key figure in the attacking vanguard of the group with the 21st level of forces. The man only laughed at her statement about retirement, but noted with some sadness that it would be a good idea. The girl herself noticed a wound on Bork's hand, where it was necessary to stop the bleeding as quickly as possible. The man himself said that there was nothing wrong with this, and he asked Emba to stop worrying about trifles. At this statement, the girl blushed and began to object that she should not worry at all. Suddenly, the wound on his hand began to heal little by little, not leaving even a small scar. As it turned out, it was another girl from the team who was healing a wound with the help of magic, calling on the life-giving power of nature to help herself. It was Bork's younger sister, Avenral, a level 16 healer, who arrived just in time to ask if her brother was okay, interrupting a very private moment. While the girl was wailing at the team members that they couldn't do anything without her, she didn't notice how one of the monsters approached her from behind. However, suddenly, out of nowhere, a powerful pillar of flame formed which killed the monster at once and then fell right under the girl's feet. As it turned out, Hubo Crows, an 18th level magician who was responsible for the rear guard in the team, arrived in time. He kept lamenting that if it had been a little more, then trouble would not have been avoided. The entire Boar group was a very well-balanced team where everyone knows their place, and because of this, in terms of the number of successful tasks, they are not only the first but are also considered the most reliable group in Ampros. It is simply impossible to imagine better conditions for a novice hunter. However, the guy himself did not participate in the battles because he is considered very weak, and as a result, he became a simple porter who was incredibly bored during the entire show. But he did not lose heart because, although he could not directly participate in battles due to the level, the payment in any case was divided equally between all members of the group. So, while the guy was sitting in a kind of ambush, the monsters in the forest turned their attention to him. While the hero himself was thinking that even though everything was fine, he still had one problem. At this time, the 25th leveled Voke Lord came out of the forest, looking at the guy and assuming that he was their opponent. But then why was he smiling so strangely? The monster tried to attack the hero because he considered him a simple weakling, but he didn't even have time to take a step before he fell to the ground dead. It turned out that the hero threw a small pebble at him, thanks to his knowledge of physics, without a single emotion on his face. This monster had the highest level among the others, but the guy was unable to gain a single experience point because the beast's level was too low for him, and the system required him to find someone stronger. Then Rai decided for himself that next time he would find someone stronger, while Ivan called him to get out of the shelter because now it was safe around. After some time, the carcasses of the monsters that the group had killed during all this time were butchered right on the spot. Bork's sister called her brother to pay attention to how big a heart she got, because you can get about 15x for it. All members of the group began to rejoice because, indeed, they could sell this organ for a fairly high price. While the guys were discussing what else could be sold, Rue sat in a fog, remembering that once, this sight would have made him vomit right on the spot. But so what? Because in the mountains, this has become a habit. He began to sort and cut the meat with incredible speed, and the members were surprised at such speed, to which the guy said that he had been practicing this for more than 20 years. Everyone was very surprised at such a long period of time and asked how old he was then, to which Ryu replied that he was now 24 because he stopped aging right around that age. He also said that 20 years ago, he was kidnapped, and he doesn't even remember the faces of his parents, and it's very difficult to return home. That's why he has such a body. Jor responded to this by saying that he wouldn't have to suffer anymore, because now they were his family, and the guy himself couldn't get enough of how good the people were around him. He thanked them for helping him despite his low level, to which the man said that there was nothing to worry about because even he was level 25 5 years ago. The hero, a little shocked, noticed that he still had the same level, and Eric explained this by the fact that here, in the surrounding area, if you don't go to dungeons, there are no strong monsters. EMA only noted the Devoke Lord, and there is no need for them to hunt stronger monsters. That is why they never go to dungeons, which completely threw Rue out of his normal rut. Then he stood up abruptly and said that he would go and practice a little with the sword, to which Bijur advised him not to overexert himself and not to go far because it could be dangerous. When the guy left, the boy decided to go with him to keep an eye on him, to which the team captain agreed because they didn't know how many monsters were left in the area. Hubo went beyond the fence but did not find any rear there. The hero himself ran through a dense forest and kept thinking that he simply had no words, because there was not a single monster in the area that could give him experience points. He simply refused to believe it and continued to look around in the hope that at least someone would be at least one level higher. Then the guy remembered that when he talked with Ether, he said that in the Satch Forest, there was no one stronger than him, and this was not at all pleasing because right now, the hero was clearly convinced of this. Although even if there had been someone equal to Ether, nothing would have worked out anyway. So the guy decided to return before it completely got dark, but suddenly, the guy heard a strange sound behind him, as well as an unknown monster of quite large size.